3 years ago, my friends invited me on a weekend camping trip deep into Oregon's Umpqua National Forest. We wanted to get away from the city for a couple of days, disconnect from everything, and spend the weekend surrounded by nothing but trees. Looking back now, I wish I had stayed home. What happened that weekend still keeps me awake at night, and I don't think I'll ever go camping again. We reached the campsite just before sunset. It looked perfect. A small clearing surrounded by tall pine trees, with enough space for 4 tents and a fire pit in the middle. The nearest campsite was far enough away that we couldn't even hear other people. At the time, that felt like the perfect escape. We spent the evening around the fire, making food, joking about work, and talking about old memories. As the sky turned completely dark, the forest became strangely quiet. No birds, no insects, just the sound of the fire crackling in front of us. None of us thought much about it. Around midnight, we finally went to sleep. I remember checking my phone one last time before putting it away. No signal. I closed my eyes, expecting to sleep through the night. But sometime after 2 in the morning, I woke up to the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside my tent. At first, I told myself it had to be a deer. Animals wander through campsites all the time. But these footsteps didn't sound random. They were slow, deliberate, almost like someone was trying not to make any noise. Then they stopped, right next to my tent. I held my breath and waited, hoping whoever or whatever it was would keep walking. I stayed completely still. I didn't even want to breathe too loudly. After about 20 seconds, the footsteps started moving again. They didn't walk away. Instead, they slowly circled our campsite, stopping every few steps as if someone was looking directly at each tent. I kept telling myself it had to be another camper who got lost. But deep down, I knew that didn't make any sense. I carefully unzipped my tent just enough to look outside. The campfire was almost dead, leaving only a few glowing red coals. The moonlight barely reached through the trees. At first, I couldn't see anything. Then I noticed movement between 2 trees about 30 yards away. Someone was standing there, completely still, watching our campsite. I couldn't make out the person's face. They were too far away, hidden by the darkness. But I could clearly see the outline of someone wearing what looked like a dark hooded jacket. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stood there, staring in our direction. After what felt like an entire minute, they slowly stepped backward and disappeared into the trees. When the sun came up, I told everyone what I had seen. Ethan laughed and said I probably dreamed it. Tyler thought it was another camper trying to scare us. Mark was the only one who looked concerned. Still, we agreed to continue with our plans and spend the day hiking deeper into the forest. About an hour into the hike, Mark suddenly stopped walking. He pointed toward the ground without saying a word. There were fresh boot prints in the mud. They weren't ours. The strange part was that they were heading in the exact same direction we were. We followed them for several minutes until they suddenly disappeared. Not because the ground changed, but because whoever made them had stepped off the trail and vanished into the thick forest. None of us said much after that. We kept hiking, but the mood had completely changed. Every few minutes, one of us would look over our shoulder without even realizing it. The forest suddenly felt different. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt like we were being watched from somewhere beyond the trees. About 20 minutes later, Ethan noticed something off the trail. Hidden behind thick bushes was a small clearing. In the middle of it sat an old camping chair, a burned-out fire pit, and a blue tarp tied between 2 trees. It looked like someone had been living there. Recently, there was no one there, but the place didn't look abandoned. A half-full water bottle sat beside the chair. A backpack leaned against a tree. Inside were canned food, batteries, rope, and several empty notebooks. Whoever owned that campsite hadn't been gone for long. Mark suddenly whispered, "Guys, don't move." We all froze. He wasn't looking at the campsite anymore. He was staring into the trees behind us. I turned my head slowly, expecting to see nothing. At first, I didn't. Then I caught the slightest movement between the branches. It looked like someone had ducked behind a tree the moment we looked in that direction. None of us waited to investigate. Ethan quietly said, "Let's go." We left the hidden campsite and walked back toward the main trail as quickly as we could without running. No one spoke. The only sound were our boots on the dirt and the wind moving through the trees. But every few seconds, I had the overwhelming feeling that someone was walking behind us at the exact same pace. We finally made it back to our campsite just before sunset. Nobody laughed anymore. The hidden camp we had found earlier kept replaying in my mind. Someone had been living out there, close enough to watch every person who came through these woods. We packed away most of our food and agreed that we'd leave first thing in the morning. We lit one last campfire, but nobody had much to say. Every crack from the trees made us look up. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a feeling that someone knew exactly where we were and was simply waiting for the right moment. Sometime after midnight, I woke up again. This time, I didn't hear footsteps. I heard the faint sound of metal tapping against metal. I slowly reached for my flashlight, but didn't turn it on. The sound came again, closer this time. Then I realized it wasn't random. Someone was tapping on the zipper of my tent from the outside. I shouted as loudly as I could. The others woke up instantly. Ethan unzipped his tent and pointed his flashlight toward the trees. For just a second, the beam caught a man wearing a dark jacket running between the trees. None of us chased him. We grabbed our keys, threw everything into the truck, and left the campsite without packing most of our gear. We reported everything to a park ranger on our way out. He listened without interrupting, then asked one question that made my stomach drop. "Did you find an old campsite covered with a blue tarp?" We nodded. He looked down for a moment before saying, "We've been trying to find a man living there for months. Several campers have reported being watched at night, but nobody has ever managed to identify him." We never went back to that forest again.